Hey, LAWSTACHE here. I'm an attorney in the Southern District of California here in San Diego. If you've been watching my channel, you already know the following information. Every Wednesday, we go into a deep dive on one particular case, and every Friday, I give you an informal overview of some of the big topics that I saw in the days prior. Today's Friday, so that's what we're going to do. Let's take a look at some of these big topics. The first one is qualified immunity. Now, this is a legal doctrine that shields law enforcement and other public officials from civil lawsuits and civil liability. Now, I will tell you as a criminal defense attorney, if one of my clients is charged in criminal court with a criminal offense and law enforcement violated this individual's rights, the usual remedy is suppression of evidence. Anything that the police found in violation of my client's rights cannot be used against my client in trial or in any other proceedings. Often enough, it might lead even to a complete dismissal of the case. Now, if there is no criminal case and your rights have been violated, the only thing you can do is sue law enforcement and public officials. But then qualified immunity as a doctrine comes in and might save those people from the civil liability. I will tell you that a lot of you know a lot about this doctrine because anytime I publish a video on my YouTube channel, somebody often enough puts in the comments how much they hate the doctrine and that it should be taken off the books, we shouldn't be using it anymore, and so on. But one thing I will tell you, it is rare to see a member of the judiciary criticize qualified immunity. And that's exactly what happened in this particular case. I will link it in the description below. Take a look at it. It's interesting. But to tell you what happened, District Judge in Mississippi, Judge Reeves, said that shielding police and other officials from liability for their misconduct is bad law and policy. And in quote, he said this, "Qualified immunity is a judicially confected, morally bankrupt, power-aggrandizing legal doctrine that the Supreme Court had no business inventing in the first place." Very harsh words about the qualified immunity. This is something you don't see every day. So click on the link below, read a bit more about it. The second topic is about VeriWatch and ICE detentions. I will tell you, about 3 years ago, when Biden came to power, there was a lot of talk about getting rid of private jails. Now, practicing here in the Southern District of California, here in San Diego, we have two local private facilities. One is GEO here in downtown, and the other one is called Core Civic, or CCA, next to the border. These private detention facilities hold immigration detainees as well as martial criminal defendants. They hold both. We, of course, also have actual federal facility, MCC, here in downtown, and the state facilities throughout the county. But in this story, we're focusing on private jails. There was a lot of criticism of private jails because these contracts that these private companies make with the federal government often enough require the federal government to fill the beds. Otherwise, pay the penalty. What often enough it leads to is that there's more prosecutions, more people being arrested, and so on. Now, of course, 3 years later, I'm not sure where we are anymore, whether the Biden administration is still trying to get rid of private facilities or not. I will tell you the one here in downtown GEO and the one next to the border are still there. There was a lot of talk about closing them, but they're still open and functioning 3 years later. One thing that about the topic today is VeriWatch. Now, I didn't know about VeriWatch until I read about it just this past few weeks. This is a device that's worn by ICE detainees. It is basically a watch or GPS device that tells ICE where this individual is. Basically kind of like an ankle monitor that we're used to, but it looks a little bit different. It is called VeriWatch. About a year ago, in May 2023, only 50 individuals were wearing these devices. This was a pilot program in Denver. Now, a year later, about 2,975 people are wearing the same device. This is of May 18th, 2024, which is also about 800 people more than just 2 weeks prior. So the numbers are growing. ICE is clearly enjoying using this device, and they're using it more and more. I was interested in who manufactured this device and who owns it, who has the contract. And I found out that VeriWatch is manufactured by BI Incorporated. And BI is a subsidiary of Geo Group, the same Geo facility, the same Geo that has the facility here in downtown and throughout the countries. So this is a private company that apparently has both detention facilities, and they're going into some of these other arenas like ankle monitors, VeriWatch, GPS tracking. So interestingly enough, instead of the Biden administration closing down the private facilities, it seems like we're giving more and more contracts to these private companies in trying to either surveil the ICE detainees or putting them in jail. Interesting topic. I will see how the numbers grow, and I will tell you the statistics will probably show that more and more people will be put on this VeriWatch. So take a look at the link below to learn a little bit more about this particular topic. Our third one is that the FBI has now published their preliminary data on crimes. And throughout all categories, the crime is down. Murder and rape were down 26%, robbery was down 18%, aggravating assaults fell by 13%, overall crime was down 15%, property crimes were down 15%. So all sorts of crime is down, but I will tell you there's a lot of criticism on how these numbers come around. I will tell you that different departments, police departments, federal law enforcement, have to report to the FBI their numbers, but they don't come in clean. And there's a lot of talk about having some sort of system where it would be better. So a lot of these numbers are not accurate at all. So I will link in the description below about this topic. Take a look, read on your own. But again, interesting that FBI is now reporting that all sorts of crime is down. And finally, my fourth and final topic deals with the Sentencing Commission. If you've been watching my channel, you've seen that I often enough refer to this book, the Federal Sentencing Guidelines. It is a book that's published by the Sentencing Commission every so often, and it lists every crime inside, every federal crime. But instead of giving you the definitions or the statute itself, rather, once I know what my client is charged with, I can refer to this book to figure out how much time my client will be facing in federal prison if he's convicted of that particular crime. So the book essentially tells the judges and prosecutors and defense lawyers on how much time somebody should be facing. Now, the guidelines are not mandatory, they're advisory, meaning that the judge first has to calculate the guidelines, but he doesn't have to follow them unless there are mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums are separate. Of course, they're not in the book, they're going to be in the statute. Certain crimes carry mandatory minimum where the judge is not permitted to go under that particular number. The latest study that the Sentencing Commission has done, by the way, the Sentencing Commission also has sort of a research group, and every so often they do long-term and short-term studies on recidivism, on what sort of crimes people are committing, and so on. The latest study is about drug trafficking, and unsurprisingly, the number one drug that's being trafficked is methamphetamine. The statistics show that methamphetamine has been the predominant drug in federal caseload since fiscal year 2014, comprising approximately 1/2 of all drug trafficking offenses in fiscal year 2022. So this is roughly a 10-year study. Now, I've also been practicing law over a decade now, and I do a lot of federal work, and I will tell you, I don't really need a study to know that just about every case that I have has to do with methamphetamine. Again, being here in San Diego, we're a border district, a lot of immigration-related, drug-related crimes are here in San Diego. We're the second busiest district in the country, and so I see a lot of drug offenses because they come through the border. And yes, most of the cases that I have deal with methamphetamine, and lately, unfortunately, we see also a lot of fentanyl. But this study was particularly focused on methamphetamine. The study also found that individuals sentenced for trafficking of methamphetamine were convicted of the offense carrying mandatory minimum penalty more often than all other individuals sentenced for drug trafficking. 74% of all individuals with methamphetamine had a mandatory minimum, versus roughly 56% of individuals who trafficked other drugs faced a mandatory minimum. The federal system is very harsh sometimes. And if there's a mandatory minimum, I will tell you, you really need to have a good lawyer on your side in order to get you under that mandatory minimum and try to figure out the case. There's, of course, ways to get around it. A lot of times it has to do with how the individual is charged, because with drug offenses, your mandatory minimums usually come in based on the quality and quantity of drugs. So if you're faced with this sort of case, hire a good lawyer that focuses on federal criminal defense. But if you're interested just generally on federal crimes, I will tell you, go to the Sentencing Commission's website, because they publish a lot of these studies that show not only the type of drugs, but there's all sorts of studies, including how age shows the recidivism, how individuals who are older will not commit as many crimes just because of their age, and so on. And of course, they often enough also focus on how many people commit more crimes when they're released. And these are long-term studies. There's 10 and 20-year studies on their website. Very interesting information. They also have another system there where you can choose any district or multiple districts and see what sort of sentences individuals receive for a particular crime. I often use that in order to educate my judges on what sentences other individuals in other districts might be receiving for the same crime. If you're interested in that topic, I will link a link to the Sentencing Commission. Take a look at it, but the latest study has been about methamphetamine. These are all the 4 topics I wanted to share with you. If any of those interested you, again, the links will be below. Thanks for watching. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star review rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to LAWSTACHE.com and check out some of my merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts. I will see you next Wednesday for a deep dive on another case. And for now, thanks for watching.